One of the things I've enjoyed watching you move and watching what you're pulling off in your space and with your brand and the whole process is just how you're leaning in on values. At Ramsey, we've got 14 core values, which my friend Pat Lencioni makes fun of me. He says, how can they be core if there's 14 of them? But because he thinks we ought to only have 3, and he and I have a lot of arguments about that, but he's wrong. So, we've got core values, and the problem with values is once you state them, if they really are values, then a lot of your decisions are already made. It's the execution then that's painful. If you say, you can't work here if we do this is a core value, we don't mistreat people, and if you're mistreating someone, you can't stay, then automatically we know what we have to do when someone misbehaves in that way, but now we've got to go through the pain and the process of letting someone go, and it's very, very painful. So a lot of these guys have not necessarily set their core values in place, their guiding principles. How do you go about uncovering in an organization, in a business, what your core values, your guiding principles are?
Well, I would say the first thing likely to do when you're trying to solve that problem is don't fall prey to HR or managerial speak. You know, there's nothing I find more painful, except maybe reading art criticism, than reading badly written corporate vision statements.
No, God.
Because mostly they look to me like they're post hoc justifications and hand waving, and that makes them hypocritical and false, as well as generally inelegant and painful, sort of aesthetically. That's a really bad idea. What you want to do instead is you want to figure out what it is that you're trying to do. And maybe what you're trying to do, it's possible that what you're trying to do fundamentally is make money. And I actually don't think there's anything wrong with that fundamentally. I don't think that should be something that is, what would you say, core to your life, because if you're willing to sacrifice everything to money, you're going to run into some serious problems very, very rapidly. But you know, as part of your business endeavor, I actually think it's a worthwhile goal because it brings a certain amount of discipline to your endeavors. You know, I do almost everything I do on a for-profit basis because it's one of the ways of stopping yourself from making stupid decisions, right? Because it's not that easy to run something in a manner that will actually generate a profit, and it keeps you lean and careful and focused if you require yourself to do that. And you shouldn't be apologetic about that either, because unless you're willing to sacrifice everything to money, attempting to run something profitably just means that you're running it in a way that can maintain the organization and allow it to grow. And in principle, that's admirable. If you want to derive your core values, you have to figure out, well, why the hell are you doing what you're doing? You know, what is it? And you really have to think that through. It's like you're willing to devote your life, your time, your resources, your energy, the time you could be spending with your family. You're willing to devote this to this enterprise. Well, what is your enterprise aiming at? And it probably has one aim that's transcendent, let's say, and by that I mean above all other aims, and you need to be very clear about what that is. And once you are clear about what that is, there will be a handful of principles, like game rules, that will emerge from that. If this is what we're doing, then we have to do this. And you don't want too many of those, because they say bad rules drive out respect for good rules, right? It's minimum necessary rules. You're playing a game of sorts. There's some victory in mind, and in order to play that game and obtain the victory, there's a set of rules that you have to abide by, or principles that will enable your actions. And that's what your core values are, and that's part of your mission statement. Like, a mission statement isn't some ethical postage stamp that you paste over what you're actually up to look good. That's unbelievably damaging and hypocritical. What a mission statement is, and a statement of core values is, it emerges as the consequence of serious thought about what it is that you're engaged in. You know, like if you're working in construction, well, high quality housing, aesthetically pleasing, at the lowest possible cost, delivered with maximal efficiency to clients that you serve hospitably and develop long-term relationships with. Like, that's a pretty good vision. I mean, people need somewhere to live, and they obviously need someone to provide it. And if you're going to do it, you might as well do it well. And why not make it beautiful and treat your customers properly while you're doing it? Like, where's the moral inadequacy in that? You know, and maybe the leftists will shake a finger at you and say, well, you're doing it at a profit, and and that's all for you. It's like the proper response to that is, well, you're an inefficient dimwit if you run it at a loss, and so there's no morality there. Well, obviously, and you can't grow and you can't market, and it's just a sign of your inadequacy. There's no exploitation in profit, not if you understand that, well, there is no exploitation, no necessary exploitation in profit. And it's very important to get that right so that when you're attacked, you're not feeling guilty. You know, we were talking backstage about this idea that successful people often, at some point in their career, they decide they're going to engage in philanthropic enterprises, and they say, well, it's time for me to give back. It was like, well, what are you saying when you say that? I've been ripping you off for 30 years, and I've got away with it. Now I've got this pile of loot like Scrooge McDuck, and I'm going to give 10% of it back so I can pat myself on the back. Well, that's not a good story. If you've run, I mean, I've had a lot of jobs in my life, and I've run a number of businesses, and some of them have, you know, run into serious trouble and not worked out well, and the others have thrived. And it is definitely the case that if you're going to run a business properly, that you have to run it as an ethical enterprise, and that there's no reason whatsoever to be apologetic about that.